Brilliant, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Health and Wellbeing Board. I'd just like to start off by advising and noting that this meeting is being webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's YouTube site, and that the members of the press or public may take photos of any footage except where there are any confidential exempt items. The next item is declarations of interest. Does anybody have anything to declare? Nope. Okay. And then I've got apologies. Somebody can advise me on the apologies that I've had from people. Okay. So I've got apologies from Dr. Clara Day, Richard Beacon, Robin Miller, Suzanne Cleary, Stephen Raybold. Are there any other apologies that I'm not aware of that need to be recorded?
Yes, Chair. Patrick Nyumbo from the Mental Health Trust was here, but we within the NHS we really pressured in terms of mental health services, so I said I'd cover anything.
That's fine. Thank you.
Sue Harrison. Sue Harrison.
And Sue Harrison. Thank you.
He's joining us at half.
Oh, so Sue will be joining at 1:30, I think. Okay. Yeah, but we've got someone until then. Yeah. Thank you. Strangely, date of the next meeting is the next item, and it also says today's date, which shouldn't be there, but the next one will be the 31st of January. And then I've got any minutes or matters arising from the previous meeting.
Aidan, have we got any actions outstanding from the last meeting?
No outstanding actions.
Thank you. I guess that covers also the action log. Thank you. So the next bit is the chair's update. And I'd like to, firstly, you've just mentioned Aidan, so I'd like to start off by saying a thank you to Shiraz, who I think yesterday was his last day. And we'll be joined by Aidan, who this is his first day. And so hopefully we'll get to know Aidan through future meetings. But just to put on record, thanks to Shiraz for the work that he's been doing on the Health and Wellbeing Board. And then the other thing I just wanted to inform members of was a letter that we've sent to government through the Creating a Healthy Food City Forum, and some of the members of this board may already be aware of it. But what I'll do is at the end of this meeting, we'll get the actual letter circulated, because it's quite a detailed, documented letter, and there's no chance that I'm going to read like 7-8 pages to you guys today, but I will make reference to some of the calls that we've asked for specifically, just so that they're noted. So the 6 key things that we've requested and asked the government, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer to take note of in relation to the impact of the cost of living, and specifically looking at food and the food system area, is the first one. The first call is to appoint an independent commissioner for food security and a cross-party and interagency task force. The second is to extend free school meals to all children whose families are in receipt of universal credit, with automatic registration for families on universal credit, increasing the value of the Healthy Start vouchers in line with inflation and extending eligibility, require the Department for Work and Pensions to issue pre-sanction warnings and instigate direct verbal contact before benefit sanctions are enacted, promote healthy and nutritious food by committing to keep all anti-obesity measures as the legislation against buy one get one free and other volume-based promotions, and the 9 p.m. junk food watershed and other advertising restrictions, ensuring long-term commitment to achieving the national obesity targets. And then the next one is to introduce income support measures for those on benefits and strengthen the welfare system longer term. And then finally, maintaining local government funding in line with inflation, ensuring the ring-fenced public health grant remains protected as part of its response. So they're the key sort of areas. And as I've said, there's quite a lot of detail and evidence that we've submitted as part of an annex as the letter. So and it was also signed off by the leader of the council as well. So I will ensure that members of the Health and Wellbeing Board have received that letter as well. Aside from that, I don't have anything else to say in the chair's update, apart from It is my birthday today, and there are some, thank you, and there are some donuts, and because we're the Health and Wellbeing Board, there is a healthy option available as well for members of the board. Grapes and bananas, I think that is. Yeah, thank you, Kerry, for the fruit options. And that's all I have for the chair's update. I can move on to the next item. Oh, actually, apologies. I just want to make members aware that at some point, potentially, I might have to step out of the chair because I need to take a call from the police, and you take the call. So when I do need to do that, if the call happens during the course of the meeting, then I'll ask Justin to step in. Thank you. The next item I've got are any public questions. I don't believe we haven't had any. Thank you. And then this moves us on to the real focus of this meeting. And I know that members all agreed that the cost of living is definitely one of the biggest, most pressing concerns during this period of time. And we agreed that we would focus our November meeting on the cost of living. So I'd like to start off by introducing Greg.
He's online.
He's online, okay. Greg Ward, who will give a measure and response update on behalf of the council in relation to the cost of living crisis. Greg, can I hand over to you?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And with your agreement, I just wanted to do a brief presentation just to update you on progress to date. Is that okay?
Yes.
So I'll just pull up some slides that I prepared for this. Can you see that all? Sharing?
Yes, Greg, can you put it in present day?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, thank you. So just to go through this, we at the beginning of September, the council decided to declare a cost of living emergency, and since then we've been really working at pace to try and deliver as much as we can to local people who are struggling with the challenges of the winter months. And one of the first things that we did is we set up the governance so that we're really clear as to how we're going to make decisions about what we invest in the short term over the winter months. So as the committee can see here, there is a cost of living strategic response group that in turn reports to CLT and then to the Cabinet and full council. And that's chaired by Richard Brooks, the Director for the Strategy, Equality and Partnerships, and has a number of members from right across the council on it. And that group decides what is it that we're going to do. And then the group underneath it, the Cost of Living Tactical Coordination Group, decide how we're going to implement those actions. And then if you look just underneath that, you'll see that there are a number of immediate actions that we drew from previous work that we had done on inclusive growth to look at the areas that we could best work on to support the most people in Birmingham over this difficult time. So they were access to benefits and money advice. The committee will probably be aware that in Birmingham, there's a tendency to under-apply for benefits. People don't realise what they're entitled to, and there can be quite significant uplifts in income just by taking up the benefits that people are entitled to. Warm spaces, creating a network of these across the city, food provision, the supporting of our own staff, and then energy efficiency. So this is the progress that we've made since the beginning of September. We've created, with our partners, and we've had significant support from many people across the city to do this, some 53 warm spaces, and you'll find these on the website. They're a subset of 99 registered spaces and in development, and we're really looking forward to reaching that goal of 100. We want to create at least 100 to 120 of these spaces across the winter. And we've launched warm welcome information sessions with partners. And this has been a tremendous opportunity for us to learn from other people who are doing this really well across the city already. And we're actually doing it before the council set up its own warm spaces. And we've gained a tremendous amount of knowledge and advice from that. The British Museums Trust is to use a number of their sites. Some of them have already gone live as warm welcome spaces. Library of Birmingham, welcome spaces have gone up, and a very well attended first week. In fact, a resident came in who we identified as fleeing from domestic violence and was able to receive support and advice from staff on site. The fire service have also committed to opening a warm welcome in Ward End. We're hoping it's not too warm, but we're really pleased that they've joined us in doing that. And then we're working now on approval for a new package of support for food banks who will produce meals for vulnerable residents every month. And we are aiming to produce around 50,000 additional meals every month for residents. And then we're supporting the holiday and activities food for children during the Christmas school holidays, matching DFE funding to produce 30,000 school meals for children and their families. A couple of energy initiatives. We're about to launch energy vouchers for 2,500 homes with prepayment meters. That's just awaiting some more detail on how we distribute those, and I just want to talk about that a little bit later. And also £100 energy vouchers for 1,000 homes for support with breakdowns and debt management. And then we are creating a new energy efficiency manager to generate new leverage and support for vulnerable communities. There are a number of other schemes that sit outside the council that we want to make sure that we're well integrated into. I talked earlier about advice and guidance, and the neighbourhood offices now open on Saturdays between 10 and 1 p.m. and Thursday evening 5 to 7, and that's generated only in the first 3 weeks of opening some £113,000 in new benefits for residents. And one of the first people who came in was entitled to an additional £9,000 in benefits, which was a tremendously encouraging start for us. The contact centre, the council's contact centre, is open now 5 to 7 Monday to Friday, and also 10 to 1 p.m. on Saturdays, and that's looking at contacting about 1,000 additional residents per week. And it's important here just to emphasise that we're not just working with people who come into the neighbourhood offices, but we're actually going out and contacting, the team are actually going out and contacting people who are that we know are vulnerable. And then we have just had approved a further increase in advice for our partners who are working in the third sector to create new benefits for vulnerable residents, and that's expected to lead to an additional value of some £2.5 million in new benefits over a 12-month period. One of the really important things for us was getting advice from our partners, and particularly the City Partnership, on what our warm spaces needed to look like and how we could attract the most people to them. And one of the early bits of feedback was that they can't all be one size fits all. They need to cater for particular demographics and groups of people. And so we do have spaces that are open for everyone, but also those with better access, spaces for children and families, spaces for people between 16 and 25 years old. And we're very grateful to the Birmingham Children's Trust for helping us with those spaces. And then spaces for people over 50, for women only, for men only, and spaces with other restrictions. And this is just a screenshot from the website, so residents can go onto our website and find the space that's of particular benefit to them. This is what we ask of our partners and what we try to provide ourselves as a core offer. So open and accessible consistently and for the same hours, offering at least a 2-hour warm period, fresh refreshments, a minimum a hot drink and a biscuit, access to key services and provisions, volunteering and staffing connectivity, the use of telephone, IT, opportunities to participate, because another thing that we're very conscious of is that we don't want these spaces to stigmatize, and that we want them to feel welcoming. It's called the warm welcome, and to be a place where people can socialize and combat isolation as much as to come for the warmth. And this is how we can support our partners to set up warm spaces. So every constituency in Birmingham will have a hub, which is a larger space that offers more facilities, and then it will be surrounded by smaller satellite hub spaces, which are, cafes, museums, faith centres, and so forth. And the satellites can apply for between £500 and £1,000 for adapting their space, and then the larger hubs up to £10,000 each. We provide them with a communications pack and also support through the network. And as I say, the network is becoming a really important source of advice for us and an exchange of knowledge in terms of setting up warm spaces, training, activity, and provision. Communications, of course, key to this. So we'll be investing in radio ads to guide people to their local warm spaces and other cost of living initiatives, deaf sign videos, which we'll put on YouTube, social media ads, digital screens in supermarkets for those hard-pressed shoppers who may need some other help. We're translating this information into 10 languages and into Braille, and we will seek to provide this communication at the food banks we work with and the warm spaces. All of this is underpinned by our intelligence, and that intelligence is becoming ever more granular. So this is just an example of the financial resilience ranking dashboard that sits on the newly launched City Observatory website. It's a live scorecard of where we are in terms of financial resilience rankings, and it's starting to drill down into much more granular types of information, and we're hoping it's going to be a source of invaluable information for us in targeting those citizens who are the most vulnerable in the city. So moving from wards to clusters of people who are suffering from food and energy poverty. And this work, it becomes ever more valuable as we get feedback from partners in terms of the information they have, and we're also able to provide those to other people. And I can stick the website onto the chat for anyone who's interested in having a look at that. And one of the other areas that the intelligence is helping us with is that we are aware that while there's a lot of provision across the city, and the warm banks that we've set up, we've been able to do that with our partners since the beginning of September, but that there are what we're calling deserts in provision, which is where we need to look at reaching out to partners where we don't think there is a food bank that is, a warm space that is close by, or indeed a food bank, and where we need to add to that provision. So it's giving us really valuable data. So then some next steps for us, we do feel that volunteers would really help us to enrich the programme, and there are a number of ways in which they could do that: filling in applications for benefits support, hosting our warm spaces and acting as animators to start conversations going, and to support people who might need to be signposted to other services. Surveying and sampling is an interesting one because we want to embark on some participative research that will allow us to find out more about how these spaces are working, where they're not working, who's coming in, who isn't coming in. And we want these researchers to act as volunteers, to actually be volunteers and to experience this work while doing research for us, which we can feed back into the City Observatory. Energy efficiency, we want people to help us as we move forward with delivering energy saving devices. We need people to help us in the food banks. And then we have this idea about creating some trained volunteers who are DBS accredited, who will be able to support people to access benefits and support along with our full-time professionals. Now, the sources for these volunteers, there's three main areas, really. There's already a lot of work going on. Partners have quite sophisticated volunteering services already. I went to an excellent conference of the BVSC who on Friday, who hosted a conference on volunteering. Some great insights from that. And then we have our own legacy volunteers from the Commonwealth Games, as well as engaging with the universities on specialist skills that might be able to help us with our work. And then the other very promising area for us is social value, and we've been tremendously encouraged by the work that the private sector have been doing. They've been really reaching out to us to help us with this effort. Wayfair, for instance, furniture company, they've offered to furnish 10 of our spaces, some of the biggest spaces, and they're going to deploy their designers, their interior designers, to work with our community to co-design spaces that are really welcoming and that minimize stigma. And then talks with utility companies about free power and energy, just a couple of examples. But we think that perhaps we could do a bit more in terms of constructing a small menu of asks, collaborate with our procurement team on social value, capture private sector CSR in a much more uniform and structured way, perhaps develop larger community interest levy type projects, create a recognition system for our thanking our donors, and create a portal. And these are just some of the ideas that we have, the things that we really need that we could do with help with on the warm spaces, food and fuel poverty. These are areas that, having spoken to the Chamber of Commerce and others, there seems to be a real willingness to support us on. And then longer term, could we go a little bit further than that and look at ways in which we can help more vulnerable people or people in vulnerable areas to access better income streams, but also structured careers, particularly among young people. So that's where we are at the moment. I'd be hugely appreciative of any advice that the committee can give me. I've already been speaking with a number of health colleagues, and I know that one of the big areas that we need to look at is helping those people who can't access our food banks or our warm spaces, and how we can perhaps support them a little bit more. And I think that's a combination partly of the benefits, the fuel, anti-fuel poverty and anti-food poverty measures that we're trying to put in place. But I'm sure that's just part of the answer. So I would welcome feedback as to how we could help a little bit more in those areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg, for giving us your presentation on the update in terms of the council's response and measures. I'm just going to take a moment to see if they've got any questions or comments from members of the board. Councillor McCarthy.
There's a lot of really good work going on around this, and health colleagues contributed to the asks of government were put together by the City Partnership Board, including one on the cost of disability, because if you stack up the cost of a profiling bed, a pressure mattress, a hoist, perhaps some breathing equipment as well, it can run into thousands per year, and that was at August prices. So that was added in. We've also had a bit of a round table in children's services, just to look at the situation from that angle, and got some really good sharing ideas and experience there. But we just need to keep sharing what we're doing. And perhaps the most important thing for us is inability to feed and keep warm your family in this situation is not neglect. And people should not think that if they come forward for help, that's what they're going to get accused of. I don't know if Andy wants to add to that, but it's something that organisations dealing with children and families keep talking about, so that there is understanding in all the organisations. We spend a lot of time talking about what neglect is, but what it isn't. It is being in difficulties in the current crisis. Andy, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think we already see inequalities in the nature of social care intervention and the way people perceive families' difficulties depending on where they live and their class as well as their ethnicity. So we need to avoid that being compounded when we feel anxious about a family we're seeing because they haven't got money to heat their home or feed their children. It doesn't mean that the response should be a referral to a statutory agency for an intervention that's disproportionate and inappropriate. Which doesn't mean to say that sometimes families won't be both poor and neglectful, and that's the challenge that all of us working with children and families have to manage, isn't it? Is to understand. Primarily, though, on the basis that what we do is we support families to care for their children.
Thank you. I'm not sure, Greg, whether you wanted to come back on any of this, because it was more, I feel like it was more comments on this presentation and the discussion. So if you'd like to say anything back, then you're able to. Yes, Anne, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just a couple more questions. Thank you, Greg. Really enjoyed your presentation. I'm Anne Populous from University College Birmingham, and I just wondered how we could work with you around participatory action research, if there's anything we could do.
Well, I think there's a huge amount, because the more data that we can get, the better. And one of the big problems with getting data in the community is that it feels to the community like they're sort of being watched or observed, and what we want to do is just to do things but learn from what we're doing. And particularly, I think, with the specialist spaces that have been set up, particularly, for those which are for younger people or those who are in more vulnerable circumstances. And so we saw that as being, a key role that we could ask of the university sector. And there might be a little bit of a two-way opportunity there, in that it also gives students an appreciation and real life experience of the kind of communities that one day they themselves will serve. So we think there's tremendous value in that scheme. And so we're talking to a number of people, and it's something that the City Observatory are really keen to manage for us.
Thank you. Can I follow that up with you then?
Sure, certainly, please do. And I guess the wider point is that, as I said, we don't have all the answers. We're moving at pace. We're obviously doing things so quickly that we may miss some of the nuances that you will be aware of that we need to take into account. So any advice we can get generally across the community, multi-faceted advice, is really helpful to us.
Thank you. Justin, did you want to? Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments from members? Because I've got a couple of questions, but I'll save mine till the end if there's anyone else that'd like to come in. No? Okay. Greg, as it's already sort of been echoed, just thank you for bringing that presentation and sort of going into detail around some of the things that the council are already doing. I think from the moment that the leader declared that we were in an emergency situation in relation to the cost of living, I must say that the teams and the people who've been working on trying to bring people together to have a response, a Birmingham-led response, have been working extremely hard to get us into some sort of position where we're able to say that things are already set up. But the one area of, I know you've went into detail around the warm spaces, and I've gone through the website and I did have a look through to just see, and I was quite impressed that there was a variety of different types of warm spaces. So that thinking was very useful for people who would only feel comfortable in certain settings. So just whoever was responsible for making that happen, thank you for that. But the area that I wanted to ask a bit more, if you've got any more information in terms of a more up-to-date situation, is in relation to food. I know there was a lot of conversations taking place around support for food banks or food pantries, and I think the last time, probably when I spoke at a cost of living event for BVSC, possibly last month, I was told that we're not in a final stage at that moment to know whether or not we've got the figures and things in place agreed. So I just wondered if you've got any more updates on that level to know. And Justin is sort of itching next to me, and I don't know whether he wants to come in and tell me instead. Is that what you...
So I think, and I'm looking at Sarah, we're waiting tomorrow, the call-in period to Thursday. So the proposal for the additional funding that we put forward to support the food banks has been approved by Cabinet. We have a call-in period, as you know, that expires on Thursday. So as long as that decision isn't called in, then it will go live on Friday. So
okay,
we're just waiting. We're waiting till the end of call-in.
Okay, fine. Thank you for that. But I just wondered, in terms of, for the benefit of members and people on the board, if we're able to just go into a bit more detail about what that response is, because if you've not been to any other previous events, then you may not know exactly what the council is doing in terms of response to food in the city.
So I wonder, Greg, Sarah's in the room, so shall I ask her to come to the table and just give the overview?
That's fine, Justin. I can do it, or Sarah can do it. That's fine.
Sorry, Sarah, to pull you in earlier.
So I'm allowed to just speak openly about the proposal. Just to clarify.
Yes, you give the overview, but also introduce who you are.
Okay, so I'm Sarah Pullen. I lead the food system team. I've got a session later on today as well. But my team and Rosie's been absolutely amazing in my team, and myself have been leading on the food provision area. So it builds on a lot of the feedback we got whilst doing the Birmingham Food System Strategy consultation, the Food Justice Network, who've been instrumental for the last few years supporting this food area. So we spoke to a lot of different people across the city to find out what types of response were needed. And it was very clear that the local food banks and the support food projects on the ground need to have cash to be able to respond appropriately to their communities. For example, there'll be some areas where they need to be able to buy cultural food. It's not appropriate to have food that's not halal, for example, and all these sorts of challenges. And it's very different needs in different areas of the city. So the proposal we put forward was that a 100 food banks and food projects would be able to have access to a monthly grant for 6 months of £800 a month. So it adds up to £4,800 over the 6-month period. There's an application form where people say what it is they're applying for and how it's going to be used, so we can make sure that we're mapping it across the city where there's areas of need and making sure we're not having clusters of lots of projects in one area and not somewhere else where it's needed. But we're just going through the process of finalising that form as it is, but we're building on the approach that the Food Justice Network has used with a lot of their projects. But the aim is to make sure that they're empowered to carry on doing what they're doing. There's a lot of food banks currently at risk of closing down because surplus food is dropping because lots of people are doing much better at managing waste. There's a lot less donations of cash and food from communities. So I agree with Greg that if we can coordinate our approaches where people adopt their local projects and continuously support projects in their area, as opposed to just being at harvest time or just at Christmas time, it's those sorts of things that will make huge differences to these projects. So this is just one part of the support that we're planning to put into the community and link through the Food Justice Network and the BBSE as well. Is there any more detail that any of you want?
No, thank you. Thanks, Sarah. I'm not going to actually, if members of the board have any other questions on what Sarah's just said, then feel free to chip in and ask or even advise and see whether you're able to build on any of the things that Sarah's commented. But she will be back later on in the agenda. So if any of that sort of comes to your mind at a later stage, then we can pick those things up then. Thank you, Sarah. Greg, the other questions I had was, on your slide in relation to support for partners, I think it was like a £500 to £1,000, and then there was the next layer of 10,000. I just wondered, what was the criteria to qualify for any of that support, and like how does it need to be spent? Just I ask this in case there are people who potentially could give up and their time and be able to provide a warm space if there are any gaps in the city, but aren't entirely aware of any ways in which the council can support them in doing that.
Well, just generally, the smaller grants are to buy just smaller things. Perhaps if possible a microwave or some additional heating equipment or a kettle or a little bit of food provision around biscuits and things like that, just to make it more of a sort of sociable space, and often to turn spaces, to repurpose spaces, if you like. So we've had groups like we've had a bowls club who want to provide a space, but they just need to equip it in a slightly different way. And so we want to be as flexible as possible in how people use that grant. There is an application process that people have to go through, but it's not onerous to be able to get that funding. And then for the larger grants, it's to repurpose significantly larger spaces that can take more people, and that will involve, more cost. Often there's a need to furnish the space in a different way, to provide curtains and carpets and so forth, and other elements. And so that's a slightly more detailed application process, but again, not onerous. And we aim, to try and help our partners as much as possible here to get that, to get those grants. So what I'll do if it's helpful is perhaps through the committee services, I can provide the details of those applications, so that if you have any partners or potential partners that you think would benefit from this, you could encourage them to get in touch with us.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think that would be really useful if you're able to share that information, and then we can ensure that members of the board have received it as well. Okay, so I don't think I've got any other questions or indications from members on your presentation, Greg. So I'd just like to say thank you for coming along and giving us an update on the council's response. And as always, if there are any ways in which partners and members of this group feel that we as a council can do any more and we can continue our conversations, because it's already sort of said in early part of this discussion that the only way that we're really going to be able to make a difference and to try and support as many people as possible during this difficult time right now and ahead is by working together and just continuing to have these conversations. And, I think the amount of cost of living meetings, conversations, sessions that all of us have attended in the last couple of months just goes to show that everyone is very much committed in doing what we can. And actually, there's so many of us who end up being at the same events as well. So it just shows that, there's a lot of joint at work already happening. So in terms of the council council response, I also want to just say a thank you to everyone who's been doing all of the tremendous work in dealing with the issues that we've got ahead of us. Thank you, Greg. And moving on now to the next agenda item, which again is another update from one of our partners on the cost of living. It's the Birmingham Social Housing Partnership. And I'd like to bring in Peter Richmond to give your presentation.
Thank you. The technology's beaten me, I'm afraid. So I've taken a view. I can't get the brief presentation that I've got on the screen, but it is in the pack if everybody wants to look at it. But I'll try and keep it at a headline level from what we've got. Firstly, just to put in context who Birmingham Social Housing Partnership is, some people know as well, others not at all. We're a partnership organisation of a network of the 25 housing associations that operate within Birmingham. So that could be organisations who spend most of their life in Birmingham, such as my own organisation, Bourneville Village Trust. 80% of our time is South Birmingham, a bit of time in Shropshire, but then right the way through to the national organisations such as Sanctuary Housing, Clarion, and so on, who operate nationally, but also have a base in Birmingham. And then the very sort of specialist organisations such as St Basil's, Spring, and so on. So it's a real collective of all the housing associations. And the aim really is to make sure that we're a conduit for partnership with colleagues within the city and so on. So we've existed in various forms for about 30 years, but felt it really important to have that network for communication. And one clearly is about the cost of living crisis that everybody's facing, and for the partnership saying what is our approach and what is our part of working in partnership with others around the city to deal with the cost of living crisis. And I'll cover some of the things that we do. What I would say is really reassuring that the presentation that we've just had connects really closely with the work that we're doing. There'd be nothing worse from a partnership approach if we were to say something completely different or completely at odds with what's there. So first tick is at least we're working in partnership in the same area. For the Birmingham Housing Associations, then, we've set out 4 clear aims or missions for just this winter, and we've taken the view there are some really long-term things we need to do as housing providers around this, particularly around the environment, environmental sustainability, and our housing stock. That fits within the housing strategy and is longer term. But let's not get lost in a lovely vision. Let's just crack on and start delivering what we need to do immediately to take ourselves through the winter. So the 4 areas that I'll cover briefly, the first is making sure that residents, tenants have got as much money as possible in the pocket. The second is just keeping a roof over people's heads during this crisis and beyond. How we tie in with the communities, the community response, and also how we can try and have access ourselves to a crisis-funded crisis fund support. So much of this will sound sort of very clear from what we've just heard, but from a money in your pocket point of view, every housing association, large or small, is making sure that tenants have got access to financial inclusion teams, debt advice, money advice, benefits advice, making sure we're partnering with the City Council around discretionary housing payments, the Homeless Prevention Fund, and all of those things. So really tying into everything that's available and making sure that housing association residents know what's there. And all of that will be delivered directly, but also equally importantly is signposting to all of those services that we've heard about as well. The second, in keeping a roof over your head, it's just saying that whilst people are in crisis, just making sure people keep a home, even if people are in a desperate situation where they can't afford heating, can't afford to eat. Let's make sure that somehow they don't lose the home in the crisis that's there. Housing associations and I think all social housing providers during the pandemic didn't evict anybody. That's because we couldn't, because the law said that you couldn't, but we managed really successfully to work with people to continue to keep rent payments coming in that we need, but also making sure people kept in a home. And we did that through just changing the way in which we worked, working far closely with people and building a better relationship with residents. So if we did it when there was a necessity because the law said you can't do it, then let's continue that when the necessity is around our customers. So as far as possible, making a commitment that nobody will be evicted as a consequence of poverty, or nobody will lose their home as a consequence of poverty. And all of that work around money in your pocket, let's make sure that means we keep people in a home. The third in the community response is everything that we've just heard beforehand. Is how do we make sure we're connecting in? How do our housing officers, our operatives, our support workers know that everything that's happening within the local community, the food banks, the warm hubs and everything, be aware of what's there. So if you're able to signpost residents, you're able to make those connections, you can provide the support. We're just making sure that we're a good partner within the local community. And importantly, they're not trying to take over, because sometimes we have a little bit of a habit of taking over and actually getting in the way of what's brilliant grassroots work. So understand it and partner with people who know what they're doing and know how to do this to make sure that partnership is strong. And the fourth really is just the crisis fund, making sure that frontline workers have just got access to a small amount of fund, a sort of no judgment funding contribution, that in people in absolute crisis and destitution, frontline staff can be making decisions on the doorstep about helping people. We have found we've got to be a little bit cautious about that, because the crisis is so severe, as we know, that you can run out of those small funds very quickly. But just making sure that frontline officers are empowered to make decisions and help people out. And I repeat, no judgment. This isn't a 10-page form to fill out, or why you're in the position you're in, just to be able to act and so on. So quite a simple offer, but I think you can see how it fits in very well with the broader work in the city. We're working closely in partnership with the Financial Inclusion Partnership. It fits within some of the longer term work around the housing strategy, and fits perfectly with all the work that we heard Greg set out there. So those are the four key parts that we're picking up. The final bit I would say is we are looking at some of the other issues. We are concerned about fire safety. We know people can't afford to put the heating on. They'll look for all sorts of other ways of trying to keep warm. So at best, that can be the use of sort of calogas heaters, which aren't particularly cheap but are more accessible. They can have a fire risk. They can also have all sorts of other risks. So being pragmatic about that people are told everything that we need to do, but let's make sure we don't cause any serious issues around people's health and well-being. And also the issue about housing conditions and so on. If people can't afford to put the heat on, cold and damp and so on be more prevalent. So how do we identify where the greatest risks are and the support there? So that's all I want to do really, was just share, I guess, from a housing association perspective, how we're trying to contribute to the cost of living crisis and just be a good partner within the city.
Thank you, Peter, for giving us your presentation and just bringing us all up to speed with the ways in which that you're responding to the crisis and how you're supporting people. It's good to be able to hear from other people about what actions are being taken within their organisations as well. And it just gives some sort of reassurance, like you said, that it's good that everyone's pretty much on the same page when it comes to trying to support people and recognising the sensitivity around that. I think that one of the biggest things when I've picked up in discussions around cost of living is how everyone is very much aware around the stigma and the issues around how people may or may not want to seek help and access things that they've perhaps never needed to access previously. And therefore there's a whole, I know in the Creating a Mentally Healthy City Forum, we've had similar discussions around how for some people, there's a whole level of anxiety and other issues that come with having to be in this crisis situation. So it's good that, things like the no judgment thing that you really echoed in your presentation, it's good to be able to hear that. I wonder if there's any questions from members of the board and any other detail on what's been presented. Is there anything that anyone would like to comment? Yeah, David.
Thanks, Chair. I'm the Chief Executive of NHS Birmingham Solihull. I just want to check if there's something that we missed as a system. And remember, I cover both Birmingham and Solihull. But I was struck, and I've asked my team to look at this, that some GPs across the country can actually prescribe support for heating. And it was something that Peter said, and we are the most deprived integrated care board and integrated care system in the country. Surrey, the least deprived. And I just wondered whether there's something that we might want to do as a partnership to see where we might push that. I don't know, Justin, my team have been looking at why those three pilots have gone ahead as pilots and why we weren't approached for it. And it might be something that we work on together to push on that, because I don't understand why we weren't, and I can't find out why at the moment.
So thank you, David. Just if you're able to just remind the three pilot areas, because I can only think of one. I don't mean to put you on the spot either.
I think there's one in Gloucestershire.
That's the one I can remember.
So and there were two others, but and I just wonder whether we, as a system, a care, health and care system, should be looking at as well. Because if I go and talk to GPs, many of our citizens are facing those issues, and as Justin continues to tell me, 80% of the interventions we can make, stop people coming into our system, are out with the NHS. So anything we can do to help that, I think it should be.
I think that's good food for thought in terms of being triggered from the presentation that Peter's provided around supporting people in heating homes. I wonder also how long, I know this isn't a thing for our system at the moment because we don't have it, but there's questions as to why we weren't included, and even if it is a pilot, but I guess maybe there's some work that needs to be done where we can go back and look at how we can explore and find out the period of time that's therefore in those areas.
I think it's over the winter, Chair.
Just over the winter period.
However, the NHS has put, I think, 28 million. I put 28 million pounds aside in a Fairer Futures fund this year, which isn't for me to decide how to use it. It's featured of the Place Board. So it's for Birmingham Place Board, which Professor Graham Betts chairs, and Solihull Place Board. But again, some of that is smaller grants for organisations and fits into some of what Greg was talking about earlier. So we just need to make sure that we're linked up on that. So there is resource that I've put available for the system.
For this, yes. And this is separate to the winter.
Totally separate to the £500 million winter money that the government has given you.
Yep, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, I think give me the news items to read about it. And I think it's a good point, David. I think the question is what's stopping us in terms of, the Fairer Futures Fund and actually moving at pace, because the model, as it seems, is in effect a small grants prescription, and there's through social prescribers, which we've got, so it's not new people. And I think the question is, we take that offline and just go into the Place Board and go, how quickly can we mobilise Fairer Future cash out the door into that model? Because it could be a relatively straightforward lift and drop.
I fully support that, Chair, as an action for us to take outside here.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, David. I think that there's definitely some work that we could pick up outside of this meeting and bring back to see where we're at. Are there any other questions or comments for Peter on the presentation that we've just had? No? Okay. Thank you so much for coming along and giving us an update on how what your response has been within the Birmingham Social Housing Partnership. Next, I'd like to bring in Joe Tonkin, who will be giving us an update on the Health and Wellbeing Board strategy delivery plan and the indicator dashboard. So, Joe, I can hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, this presentation is already in your pack. I'm just providing an update on the strategy and talking about the delivery of it. So you will know that our joint strategy was approved by Board and by Cabinet earlier this year. It's a high-level plan for reducing health inequalities and improving health and well-being. These are the 5 core themes and 3 life course themes. So the focus now is on delivery. So colleagues will know, and this board receives updates from the action groups that sit underneath this strategy, focusing on these themes. What we are now proposing is that we step up an operational delivery group to support the delivery of the strategy and include lead officers from each of those Health and Wellbeing Board forums. We will also be implementing an annual review of the strategy that will come to this board. And I'll go on to talk about the indicators that we'll be monitoring and providing feedback on to this board. We have also created a dashboard. It's a Power BI dashboard which brings together all of the indicators that are included within the strategy. So colleagues will know that the strategy is an ambitious one with many goals. Indeed, there are 60 ambitions linked to 86 indicators. And it is those indicators that are reflected on the dashboard. Now we know that we might have to review our approach, and that will be kind of included in this annual review that we're proposing. We also know that there are some gaps in the indicators, in the measures that we want to collect to understand our success or not. And so that will also be included within the review. So just in relation to the dashboard is published on the City Observatory website, which was launched on the 22nd. And Greg referred to earlier, so already demonstrating itself to be a important asset for the city. Most of the indicators on the dashboard are publicly available. This provides just a sort of snapshot of the dashboard, just to kind of orientate yourself around it. You can select key themes in relation to healthy and affordable food at the top of the dashboard, and then select indicators, understand what the kind of latest values are and the trends over time. At the bottom of the dashboard, you'll be able to click onto buttons which understand the sort of data source, lead agency, some kind of explanation about what that kind of means and why it's important. So as always, colleagues, please do explore the dashboard. Let us know if you have any feedback. And we do, of course, welcome any suggestions on how to take the work forward. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Jo, for going through that presentation. Do we have any questions or comments from members? No? Okay. You've been let off lightly, Jo. Thank you for that update. And we can move on now then to the next item. And I'd like to invite Sarah back around the table to give an annual update for the Creating a Healthy Food City Forum.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. First of all, just to say, around by the drinks, there's copies of the full strategy and people's version of the strategy that you can take as well. And I shall just share my slides. I presume everybody on the call can hear me as well, even if the microphone's off on here.
Yeah, I think, is there a green light on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. So as I introduced earlier, I'm Sarah Pullen and I lead the food system team in the public health division. We've got various things that we've been doing over this year with the Creating a Healthy City Food Forum. So I know in the packs that we've given you a fairly comprehensive view into the lots of different things that we're doing. But if there is anything that you want to know about in more detail, please do reach out, because I know that there's a lot. So first of all, one of the huge achievements of the forum, my slides will work. Okay. Is that we launched the draft Birmingham Food System Strategy and led a consultation over the summer. There was a huge amount of engagement, both leading up to the creation of the strategy and also during the wider consultation as well. So we've had the forum has been incredibly active and really useful, diverse collection of ideas and perspectives that really shaped the strategy. And our vision is to create a bold, fair, sustainable and prosperous food system and economy where food choices are nutritious, affordable and desirable, so all citizens can achieve their potential for a happy, healthy life. And really key to our approach is that we want to collaborate, so strengthen partnerships and build on existing good practice. We want to empower and remove barriers and facilitate solutions. And we also want to equalise and focus actions where they're needed most to reduce inequalities. So we got about a 52-page document that my colleague wrote of all the consultation feedback and the modifications we're doing. So we're working through those changes. I think the key things to say, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive for the strategy we've got so far. And any of the changes that we're building is just making it stronger and linked to a lot of the things we've discovered across the city over the last year. So there's not any huge changes, but they will be restructured and the work streams will be rethought out slightly. But we'll be looking forward to sharing that with you in May once that's published as well. And really key to our approach as well is we've been capturing the stories of local food legends. So these are people across the city who, with no involvement with anybody else, have been doing absolutely amazing things in the city for years. And the sad thing is that sometimes people feel like they're really alone. They're doing some amazing projects or doing something amazing. They don't realise that there's people all across the city doing things, whether it's a food pantry or food bank, or whether it's somebody doing a growing project, or whether it's a big business that's got a really good waste practice and they're looking at different ways to minimise waste and also look at energy efficiency of their approaches. So what we're doing at the moment is we're capturing those stories, because that's the best way to show people in the city what's possible, is by letting other people in the city tell their stories and really motivate change. What we're going to be doing is with the work streams that are in the strategy. So if you take a copy away with you, you'll be able to browse through those as well. We're going to be setting up action groups in 2023. So what we want is to be sure that this isn't just a strategy that sits on the shelf, but we have loads and loads of ideas that we captured during the consultation. And those action groups will be driving those things forward, whether it's about economy and skills, employment, knowledge, things that can happen in schools, or whether it's poverty and resilience. There's so many things that we've brought people together and they'll all be working on over the coming year. So it's a very exciting area. And we've, even though it's only the draft strategy, we've already won an international award, which is wonderful. And then I'm just like, well, can we hold back and wait till we've got the finished one, and then it'd be even better. But no, it's really fantastic that it's really hit the spot. And I think the difference that Birmingham's had compared to strategies around the world is that it's a truly system-wide strategy. It's not coming at it from a farming perspective or a healthy eating perspective alone. We're looking at the whole picture, and it's very city-owned. There's a lot of people who have come together on this strategy, and it's really clear through what's happened. The next thing that's been really fantastic in Birmingham is the Childhood Obesity Trailblazer programme. So this was a 3-year programme that technically finished in the summer, but the projects were so interlinked with everything that we're doing across the strategy and the work that we're doing within the forum, that some of these projects are still ongoing now. So one of the areas is about integrating public health into built environment processes. So we've been looking at how do you meaningfully shape the environments around us and where the barriers are, and working along those areas. Also capturing food system insights and data. So we've got really good projects happening at the moment. We've got the youth service are doing a project with young people so they can develop food system tools to capture the barriers and the opportunities in the food systems around them, whether it's in the dining halls or whether it's the environments around them as they go to and from school, but really capturing from their perspective what the challenges are and what the opportunities are. And we're also doing a community research project looking at similar challenges, but looking at what we can do to change the food offer in communities and what the barriers are to food businesses to creating a healthy, sustainable food offer, and looking at how we can overcome those. And another area was embedding health literacy development. So we've got a really useful report that explored this health literacy development online module program that was developed. The University of Birmingham did a fantastic piece of work evaluating what could be learnt from that, and that can be applied to lots of health literacy programs going forward. So I've been sharing that with people across the council who could benefit from that learning. But if you know anybody else doing a health literacy project, please do get in touch and we'll share the key learning points. As has been alluded to today, there's a lot of food justice and food insecurity work that's been taking place. So within my team, we've been leading on the emergency food provision response. And then we've also had the Food Justice Pledge, which Justin and Councillor Hamilton had launched in 2021, I think in the autumn. But we had an event in the summer during the Commonwealth Games called Commonwealth Food Futures, and it was a huge launch where we had people from across the city and also cities across the world signing up to the Food Justice Pledge. And the purpose around the pledge is recognising the power that cities have and that city leaders have in really changing those systemic inequalities that lead to injustice. And it's very embedded into our strategy and our approaches. Also, as well as the letter that Councillor Khan mentioned at the start of the session that's going to government about the changes that need to happen nationally, we've also been looking at the emergency food aid fund for food banks and projects in communities. Another area is looking at the shame and stigma. So we've written a report looking at the recommendations of how you can reduce shame and stigma with support services. So we're just getting that designed and making sure it's accessible, and then we'll be able to share that. And we've also supported the Holidays, Activities and Food programme with food parcels. And another area is the upcoming projects are looking at how we can create sustainable, affordable food models in the city. So we're looking at different project options, but what we want is the infrastructure in the city to remove barriers, whether it's having access to cooking equipment in projects and so on. We're looking at how we can support these projects to do what they do really efficiently. A really exciting area is the culturally diverse healthy eating guidance that we've been developing. So we work with the Diverse Nutrition Association to conduct an initial review looking at healthy eating guidance from around the world, as well as the Eat Well Guide, speaking to loads of different people from different communities, different cultures, considering the fact that people don't live in a box. We are not one label. We don't only eat the food that came from our culture, our heritage, and we are in a multicultural society. So we're looking at the complexities of that in Birmingham, but also making sure that we can create really useful healthy eating guidance. So we're currently developing some mock healthy eating guidance that will be used during focus groups in the coming months. And then we hope to have the published resources in summer 2023. But a key area for the Health and Wellbeing Board is we'd love to have feedback from you if there's opportunities where you speak to people about healthy eating, whether it's within an NHS setting or so on, about what resources are needed within your settings, and we can make sure that we're creating a really valuable resource that works for all sorts of people across our city. Cook the Commonwealth, we ran this during the summer and it was really successful. The idea was capturing recipes from the Commonwealth countries from around the world. So if you go onto the free recipe app or website called Whisk, you sign up for a free account. It's like a social media account for recipes. And if you search CWG, which is Commonwealth Games, there are loads of recipes and from all sorts of different sources. So there were restaurants and people across the city that were sharing the recipe that their grandma used to make and so on. It was a really, really lovely project to be able to capture all these things. Whisk is also a very useful app because it's got a health score in there as well. So it's easy to see how you can make modifications to your recipes. And it's a very good way to capture community recipes too. So I would recommend it. If you've got a project where you want to share recipes, it's a very useful free online platform to do so. But yeah, the recipes and the communities were viewed 39,000 times during the summer. And we also linked to lots of community events and cooking events that were happening across the city. But yeah, those recipes are still online if you want to get inspired for what to cook for dinner. We had our first creative dinner last night. So we've got a few people here that were at the event. So that's linked to University College Birmingham. And the idea is recognising the value that University College Birmingham has in terms of tackling massive food system challenges and learning and sharing ideas across the city, and a real knowledge exchange opportunity. So the dinner topic last night was about the cost of living. So there were amazing demos for every course that the students did demonstrations of how to cook the dishes, and then we had a meal where we ate those, and we had many speakers shared the challenges of the cost of living, and then pose questions for the table to discuss and share ideas. And I have to say there were some really, really useful bits of insight that will shape the cost of living response and the strategy as well. But there will be dinners coming up over the coming months with different topics, so we would welcome you being involved as well. And also, if there's any particular topic areas, we're looking at things like sustainable healthy food and how you can actually get that embedded in a city, for example. There's many other food topics, but please do speak to Anne, Justin or myself about those as well. We've also got lots of national and international work where it's hugely beneficial to be able to be connected to so many cities around the world that are doing amazing food system work. In October, I attended a conference in Rio de Janeiro, and it was the most intense conference I've ever been to in my life. I learned so much, and there were so many useful documents and publications and examples of how cities have tackled challenges that they've got. And we came back with a lot of insights that, again, is feeding into the strategy and our approaches. It's a really useful forum. Also, we had the Food Justice Pledge, and also we're looking at creating more of a network nationally. So the Sustainable Food Places is a really active network. We're also looking at how, working through the food foundations and the connections they've got, how we can create a much more national learning network as well. And the Mandala Consortium are a collection of universities doing a huge research project in Birmingham. So they chose Birmingham as the focus of their study, but they're looking at the big solutions that we need in food systems, and they're doing amazing work at the moment. So this last year they've been doing kind of getting the groundwork and understanding what's happening in the city, and over the next few years they're going to be trialling solutions as well. But it's a fantastic project to have in our city, and it really is going to be creating solutions that are internationally relevant as well. So finally, next steps, it just relates to the things that I've mentioned already. So I won't go into too much detail, but essentially we're carrying on with what we're doing and capturing all the insights that we can. And we'll be having more of the creative dinners going forward as well. Thank you. I'm sure I went on too long, so apologies about that. But any questions are welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. And I wouldn't say that you went on too long. I feel like there's so much going on within food that, in fact, you've just given a brief update on all of the different areas. And actually and I feel like when I first came into post, I was completely blown away by how much was going on within the food area of this portfolio. But yeah, so I tried to, in my earlier sort of chairs update, not mention all of the other things that you'd mentioned, because I knew they were coming later on. And yesterday was the first of the creative dinners events, and it was a fantastic evening. I think that there was lots of really useful discussions, and the format was brilliant. It was good to be able to engage with UCB as well, and have the students participate and take part in those same conversations that the food legends that are, that are part of the food system were around the table as well. So it was a good event. Does anybody have any questions for Sarah on any of the areas? Thank you. Natalie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's more of an offer, really, Sarah. I know there's a lot of work that's been happening around the coordination of food for people that are sleeping in the city.
Yeah.
To stop any wastage and to really maximise efforts. I just wanted to make sure that you were connected into that.
I think that area especially it almost seems more detached from the food banks and for the food. So I would value connections into that area. Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Sarah? No? Thank you, Sarah. That was a really detailed presentation. And I think, am I right in thinking that this has already been circulated?
Yeah, this has been circulated. And we've also got a Food Revolution area of the website now. So as we have new updates, we'll be putting them on there.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Next item that we've got is the Creating a City Without Inequalities Forum, an update that Monica will be providing. So can I invite you to the table?
My computer's just decided to turn itself Oh. Okay. Apologies for any other phone. I did turn the volume, and it seems that the incoming calls have got
a way around
setting.
Yeah, no worries. It's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a very short sort of introduction really of the revised terms of reference for the Creating a Surviving Equality Forum, as well as the Black Hair Implementation Board that we have established to drive the implementation of the findings from the review. So starting from the forum, the direction of the forum was reviewed at the workshop back in March 2022 to align the forum with the changing landscape, as well as the establishment of the integrated care system. And the core functions of the forum include programme delivery for projects which the forum oversees on behalf of the Health and Wellbeing Board, such as Black Truth Commission, shining a light on the issues that the forum collaborates on and investigates for the Health and Wellbeing Boards and raises also to the Health and Wellbeing Board, and enabling functions which the forum oversees on behalf of the board as well. So the forum will have an oversight role on behalf of the board, and the forum's terms of reviewed to align with the direction. They have also revised the membership to align to the new functions. And in terms of the Black Hair, so the Birmingham Lewisham African Caribbean Health Inequalities Review, following the launch of the report from the review, we have entered into the implementation phase. The report was launched in June. Actually, implementation started as soon as the report was published back in March this year. The Black Hair Implementation Board has been constituted in September, and the terms of reference have been drafted. The board will oversee and lead on the implementation of the findings from the review and the opportunities for action, and co-produce implementation plans with the community and different parts of the system that the opportunities for action refer to. And it will mobilise influence and work collaboratively to ensure that those opportunities for actions are implemented. And it is a subgroup of the Creating a Surviving Equality Forum, which is a subcommittee of this board, but it will provide 6 monthly reports directly to the Health and Wellbeing Board. So both documents have been attached to the report, and I'm seeking the board's ratification of these documents. Thank you. Happy to take any questions and comments.
Thank you, Monica. Does anybody have any questions for Monica? And if not, then it's just for us to agree that decision on amending the terms of reference and just approve those. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Monica. Okay, so the next item I've got is a forward plan, but somebody can tell me whether we're just
It's just a note.
to note, because I don't even have it. Just to note. Okay. For some reason, I don't think it's part of my pack, which is why I didn't.
Yeah, it's a massive.
Okay, fine. That might be why. Okay, everyone else should have access to that, and that's just a note. And then again, the next item is a written update, which is just for information only. That should also be part of your packs. And similarly, the Creating a Physically Active City Forum is a written update, which should also be part of your packs. And then finally, same thing again for health protection, which really strangely brings us towards the end of the meeting. And I haven't had I know we're on any other urgent business, so I'll go on to that for formalities purposes. And I haven't had a chance to like checking with you before this, David. I'm really sorry to put you on the spot, but I just wanted to just check. I know that we've spoken about cost of living generally, and then we've had our regular updates, but I just wondered if there was an opportunity here that we've been lucky enough to have you and your time to attend the board today. If there was any sort of brief update you could give us in terms of winter pressures generally, because you and I think it's been a few weeks since we've had a conversation, but I just wondered if under this item, given that we've got a bit of time, it might just be useful to be able to hear from you. And apologies that I'm springing this on you.
That's okay. So I guess I'd look at winter pressures from a number of perspectives. So first of all, there's the service pressures that residents across Birmingham will be facing. And they range from being able to get through to a GP, all the way through to ambulance turnaround times in our front doors of our A&E departments. And in all those areas, we are improving, albeit we are not where we want to be. And my concern as Chief Executive of the NHS locally is what will happen on the 20th and the 15th of December when we have industrial action, and it's our job to work through that and make sure that any risks are mitigated as a result of that, so that industrial action is by the RCN. Now, we are working closely with the RCN to look at something called derogations. Derogations is a negotiation with the RCN to make sure that we have a minimum impact on our services for our patients. That's, I think, the first issue. The second issue is a lot of what you talked about today. If you're the biggest employer in the area, and for many of our staff, the cost of living is having a major impact. And I'm pleased to say that our great institutions locally are doing some great work on that. So I think the Children's Hospital are doing free breakfasts for their staff, for example. And there is a cost of living offer that we're linking into the governance arrangements that were described earlier. I think we could do more to join that up, as I said earlier, because if we could, for example, use some of the money from the NHS to help support some preventative strategies, I think that would be you. Might only have an opportunity this year to start off with. Well, let's start this year. So I think, Chair, it's important that we really push on that. And then the third area is making sure that we continue during winter to deliver our planned services. So several months ago, we had 27,000 people waiting over 104 weeks of treatment. At the end of November, we'll have 13. And at the end of December, we'll have none. I think that's testament to the hard work of the staff within the NHS. But we've got to protect that during the winter period, and making sure that that what we call elective capacity in the NHS stays protected, so we can also look after people who need care. So they're the three areas that I'd highlight. There's a real issue around staffing. I don't say this while Justin's in the room, but 33% of our staff, only 33%, it has gone up from when I was at the OSC last week, have had a COVID vaccination. A third of the staff. Clearly, that can further impact on our resilience over a winter period. So we're doing a big campaign to push that. Similarly with our flu vaccinations, that's higher, thank goodness. But hopefully the city, and I saw the leader actually tweeting about this, and that's brilliant, about let's make sure that we can get those flu and COVID vaccinations in. And finally, we are going to do some work with primary care to help decompress primary care. I think anybody who goes out to a GP practice currently and actually goes behind looks at how hard they are working, will understand that we need to support and help our GP practices. I think it's something like a third of all phone calls to GPs do not need a GP. And we are getting thousands of calls every morning at 8 o'clock. So we need to make sure that people are able to navigate through the system, because we've all been there, haven't we, at 8 o'clock in the morning trying to get through to a GP and waiting, and we need to do something about that. So they're the sort of 3 or 4 areas I'd focus on.
Thank you. And again, I know I didn't check in with you before if that was okay, but I just thought that given that we've got the time and it's useful to be able to get a quick sort of reflection on the situation as it stands from an NHS local systems perspective. So thank you, David, for giving that sort of quick update. Justin, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important for the board to kind of reaffirm what David was saying about during COVID. We talked a lot about what we can each do as individuals to protect the NHS. Coming into this winter, we need that narrative back. That getting your vaccinations, making sure that you order your repeat prescription plenty of time in advance. When you get down to your last packet of pills, not when you get down to the last strip of pills, will really help. Self-care in terms of maximising your health. We talk about kind of healthy eating, physical activity, all of those things, but actually just being sensible. The amount of pressure that's put in the NHS as it gets darker, colder and wetter through accidents is huge. And that's a combination of kind of DIY and road traffic accidents. So really, I think it's important that all members of the board take that away as a key message about helping citizens, partners and staff understand that this is now, we've got to step up to help the NHS get through this winter. Because unless we play our part, they will not manage to keep the progress that's been kind of gained since COVID, and will fall back quite quickly.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything else? Yeah, Dee.
About the element around people accessing GP practices, and a lot of the people trying to get through in the morning don't need to go that way. I just wanted to add to that there's a lot of pressure around PALS services as well. And we're hearing from providers of PALS services that a lot of people going through PALS shouldn't be going through PALS as well. So is there a bigger piece of work to map out where, because what we hear all the time is patients aren't getting the right information at the right time. We asked to widen that out a little bit to include the secondary care pathways for information too. Be really useful.
That's a good point. Probably more work we can do there. How much of that we can do just before we're officially in winter on the 1st of December, actually, for the NHS. That's when our control rooms step up, and we're on 24/7 control. So, but I think my immediate priority, I have to say, is decompressing primary care, because if too many people don't get through to primary care, then we know that they all go to urgent treatment centres. We know they go to A&E, probably inappropriately, and that causes real issues across the system. So, Andy, I think you are right that people don't know to navigate what is a complex system all too often. But I think my first priority is that primary care.
Some of the people going through to PALS is because they're waiting for treatment, and because they're not getting the information from secondary care, they're going back to their GP.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I might, Chair, so that is a key issue. So GPs are seeing demand not only. So if you've been waiting 60 odd weeks for an operation, it's natural to go back to the person who referred you and say, where am I on that? And we know a lot of GPs are getting that response. So we are working with secondary care colleagues, that's the hospitals, and actually our community services within the city, to see how they can help to decompress that. For example, wound care. So we're making sure that wound care is done by the community trust, by the secondary care sector, not necessarily done by GPs. So it's that type of thing we're working with at the moment.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, and I'll declare an interest being married to a local GP on this one, because he vents frequently about this. And I think, it's really helpful, David, you're talking about that, because so much of what my husband feels is wasted GP time is letters from secondary care going, please, can you start this patient on X prescription? And the secondary care physician is perfectly capable of issuing the first prescription. It doesn't need the GP to start a loading dose. And not just for winter, but actually if we can start to develop that more as a methodology and a way of working, it reduces so much of that pressure on primary care, because ultimately still the GP has to sign the prescription. And on average, he will do 172 prescriptions a day on top of his clinical workload, and that's not factored into the time. So I think that we have to really open up those conversations about, if you're recommending treatment wherever you are in the system, and you start it yourself, it doesn't need to bounce somewhere else in the system, and that will start to decompress. But it's quite a culture. I mean, having worked in both secondary and primary care, it is important colleagues understand how much of a cultural shift that is. It is not an easy thing to do overnight, and the way that we have practiced for the last 60 years in medicine actually does need to evolve and change, but that is not something we're going to solve by Christmas. It's the start of quite a long journey.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Yeah, sorry, I should have raised this in the full plan, but I think we spoke a little while ago about vaccinations, MMR jabs, flu jabs. We usually have a report on that. There was some very concerning stories in the press about it a couple of months ago about the rates, and I didn't see it on the forward plan. So
it's not on there.
No.
Okay, fine. I can pick that back up, because I had full intention of ensuring that it should be around January time. But if it's not, then we can pick it up and see where that's at. Thank you for bringing it up. And that's probably because I didn't have the printed version, and I don't have my laptop today. Well, circumstances beyond my control. But thank you, Councillor Bennett. Yes.
Hi, I'm Dr. Marina Sultan. I'm an academic respiratory clinician. I'm shadowing Justin today. I also work with an NHSCI and the National Health and Qualities Improvement Team. I just want to say that as an observer to this meeting, I really want to provide a lot of praise and encouragement for the huge, brilliant work that's been presented today on several fronts. I'm very happy to support anybody who would like support around linking up the provision of warm spaces with reduced NHS pressures. As a respiratory clinician, one of the biggest problems is the cost of living crisis, and patients are more likely to present to the NHS during winter if they are not having access to heating. And this intervention, it would be really good to quantify the projected proportion of benefit that the NHS is getting from this community intervention, because I would love to see this rolled out even more broadly in more places. This has significant benefits. Also want to question whether it's possible to use the warm spaces to deliver vaccinations and do blood pressure checks in due course as kind of in subsequent phases of that project. I think this is the way forward. This is absolutely brilliant stuff. I also would like to echo Justin's points about the significant cultural shift that would be and is necessarily required in secondary care. Secondary care do not see it as their role to prescribe. So even if a patient came in and said, I want a repeat prescription for lansoprazole, if you're not practicing within that area, cultural at the moment would say, actually, I've got nothing to do with this, go to your GP. We are nationally moving more towards generalist skills, and part of the work that HE have recently done is around ensuring that we're not just specialists, but that actually we as clinicians maintain generalist skills. And I would be, again, very keen to support any work that supports that significant cultural shift that is necessary, that Justin highlighted, to relieve pressures on primary care. Very finally, I completely agree that this is really about decompressing primary care. And decompressing primary care is the single most critical system point, because we do see thousands and thousands of calls at 8 o'clock in the morning, calls for things like blood tests, which could have been arranged by the person who requested the blood tests, calls for prescriptions, which should have been started by the person who started them, calls around delayed results, and actually we're seeing an increasing desire for patients to access their healthcare records online, and lots has been done to support that. So some of this is about culturally competent communication and ensuring that patients can see that. And very finally, patients not actually having a very sound understanding of health and well-being, and more is needed around the education, so that patients understand when it is that they need to see a healthcare professional and have a basic understanding of what you expect when you see a healthcare professional. Because actually, if you know, for example, that you banged your toe and from a clinical point of view, there's very little that's going to be provided apart from the usual TLC and paracetamol, then actually you might think, actually, I could be empowered to support myself with that. But these are the red flags, and this is when I need to seek medical advice. And that really fits with the narrative that's been put forward around we all have a responsibility here to protect the NHS, and it's giving patients that empowerment and that confidence to be able to support that. And very, very, very finally, health inequalities. This work is absolutely cracking because all the data suggests that by focusing on the most deprived populations, that is actually the bulk of NHS service pressures. And if we decompress and support and target our focus on the most deprived 20% of the population, then we know that that measure will have the significant, it will be the significant driver in tackling the overall sort of inequalities in healthy life expectancy and inequalities that we see in service pressures, both in primary and secondary care. So just fantastic, fantastic work, and very keen to support anybody who needs it further.
Thank you. Thank you for all of that feedback. Both from yourself and for everybody else that sort of chipped in after I prompted David to start this sort of conversation towards the end of the meeting. But I'd like to bring the meeting to a close now and just finally thank everyone who's presented today and has contributed to the meeting for bringing forward the updates that you've given. The date of the next meeting is the 31st of January, I think, on the top of my head. So hopefully see you guys then, but I know that there's lots of work that happens in between now and the next meeting. So yeah, thank you once again. And please do have some fruit or a donut on your way out. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks.